All right, let's get started. Hi, everyone. I'm Christina DiBerardino. I'm a Senior Account Executive at Direct Energy and NRG Business. Welcome to Seawheel's Clean Energy and Career Advancement Series. Today is our third session out of a four-part series. Today, we're going to explore clean energy and career opportunities in the utility sector. Next slide, please. Okay. I'd like to introduce our fantastic speakers today. We have Pat Hoffman, who's the Acting Assistant Secretary, Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary at the Office of Electricity at the DOE. We have Courtney Galatioto, who is the Chief of Staff and Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Smart Electric Power Alliance. And we have Victoria Way, who is our Director of Customer Success at EnergiaWorks. Next slide, please. Okay, today's agenda, I'm going to start by giving you a brief overview of Seawheel, who we are, and I'm going to highlight some topics in today's session. We're going to have our speaker presentations. We're going to hear about grid modernization initiative. We're going to hear about the climate plan, the jobs plan, SEPA's utility transformation challenge, and career opportunities in the clean energy sector. At about 4:20, we're going to do a Q&A with our speakers. So I'm going to encourage everyone who's attending today to post your questions in the chat box. And with that being said, we also want to know where you're from. So I'm calling in today from Alexandria, Virginia. So please start posting yours now. Our speakers would love to know. Next slide, please. Okay, Seawheel. Who are we? We are the Council on Women in Energy and Environmental Leadership. Our mission is to provide a network for women to assist in career development for existing professionals as well as those entering the field. Seawheel also provides scholarships to women pursuing STEM education. Next slide, please. Okay, here is a list of all of our Seawheel board members. I'd love to thank anyone who's attending today, as well as highlight Janine Fennell. She's the Executive Director of Leaders in Energy, and she happens to be our Career Advancement Committee Chair, who was instrumental in planning this four-part series. So thank you, Janine. Next slide, please. We have over 25 participating AEE chapters in the US and 10 international Seawheel groups. So please visit seawheel.org, learn more about our organization, see events that we're hosting, and become a member. Next slide, please. Okay, AEE, we have a lot of certifications to choose from. Some of you may recognize Certified Energy Manager. That's a very popular one. So I'd encourage anyone who's interested in pursuing a certification. I know that I am, and there's a lot to choose from. So visit our website today to see if anything piques your interest. Next slide, please. Okay, hot button topic in the news right now, the American Jobs Plan. So as most of you are aware, on March 31st, President Biden unveiled his opening bid for the American Jobs Plan. He wants to invest $2.3 trillion into infrastructure and jobs. Some of that included $100 billion into the power sector. He wants $174 billion into the electric vehicle market, as well as $180 billion into research and development. Senate's currently negotiating the terms on how to allocate spending. There's been counters going back and forth recently. As of last week, they were looking at $1.7 trillion, which would leave the environmental provisions intact, but may forego some investment into the research and development, which can be money for DOE's development for technology to combat climate change. And as you know, climate change and energy are often viewed in tandem with each other. Global temperatures rise, causing higher electricity demands, which puts stress on our already aging infrastructure. Next slide, please. Which brings us right into the importance of grid modernization. So the US grid has fueled our growth since the early 1900s, with more than 9,200 electricity generating units and more than 600,000 miles of transmission lines. But the grid we have today doesn't have the features necessary to meet the demands of the future. So the DOE Office of Electricity's work will help integrate sources of electricity, improve security of our grid, solve challenges of energy storage and distributed generation. Utilities benefit from a smarter grid by having controls which will reduce frequency and duration of power outages. Heading into a hot summer, no one likes a power outage. Next slide, please. And so President Biden's proposal, he's proposed to be 100% decarbonized of power by 2035. So to meet his aggressive goal, he has plans for more solar and wind and other renewable sources to come online. The US currently has approximately 38% of its electricity generated from clean sources. An interesting fact is 38 states, as well as DC, currently have their own version of a clean energy standard, but it varies greatly. So we have 14 states plus DC have requirements of 50% or greater carbon-free power, but many others have theirs set to 15% or less. Next slide, please. All right, which brings us to our first speaker. I'd love to introduce you to Patricia Hoffman. She is serving as Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Office of Electricity at the US Department of Energy. Patricia Hoffman also served as Acting Undersecretary for Science and Energy from January 2017 until November 2017, when the US Senate confirmed Mark Menes as Undersecretary of Energy. Ms. Hoffman was named Assistant Secretary of the Office of Electricity from June 2010 to January 2017. The focus of her responsibility was to provide leadership on a national level to modernize the electric grid, enhance the security and reliability of the energy infrastructure, and facilitate recovery from disruptions to the energy supply, both domestically and internationally. This is critical to meeting the nation's growing demand for reliable electricity by overcoming the challenges of our nation's aging electricity transmission and distribution system and addressing the vulnerabilities of our energy supply chain. Patricia is going to be speaking about Grid Modernization Initiative, Climate Plan, and the American Jobs Plan. So I'll turn it over to you, Patricia.
So thank you very much. I hope everybody can hear me okay. And I will tell you from my experience being at the Department of Energy, this is such an exciting time frame to be in the energy space. And I really appreciate the opportunity of the host for having this meeting today. So thank you, Christiana. President Biden, as she said, has laid out an aggressive strategy for combating climate change, 100% clean energy by 2035, and a net zero economy by 2050. Having an abundant clean power on a modernized, secure electric grid is critical to meeting these goals. We need to be able to move to cheaper, cleaner forms of energy where it is needed, but we also need to have the capacity to move that energy around in the United States from the renewable zones and areas where it is abundant. So this accomplishment is only going to happen unless we can create those clean, great jobs from the clean energy transition. I would like to highlight that the 2020 U.S. Energy and Employment Report that generally comes out every year or so really has identified the opportunity from a clean energy perspective for job growth in the United States. So traditional energy and energy efficiency sectors in 2019 employed approximately 6.8 million Americans, or 4.6% of the workforce of a roughly 145 million. Advanced growth in clean energy jobs have really been developed and growing in the areas of advanced low emissions natural gas turbines, the solar industry, the wind generation industry. They were the fastest growing sectors from a new generation point of view. And some of the job increases in those sectors, as identified by these reports, really is about 9.4% in the advanced natural gas sector, 3.2% in the wind sector, and 2.3% in the solar sector. So as we look forward, what are we doing at the Department of Energy? First of all, the Secretary has created a new Energy Jobs Office of Energy Jobs. The purpose of that office is to really focus on projects and that we support the highest potential for job creation in the energy sector. In addition, the Department of Energy, through the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, has strong aspirations really to drive the cost of solar, to cut the cost of solar by more than half, and add 30 gigawatts of offshore wind capacity by 2030. Both of these supporting approximately 77,000 jobs and powering 10 million homes. The department is also looking at how we can reduce the cost of clean hydrogen by 80% by 2030, making it competitive with natural gas. Other areas in the department are actually also within the Office of Energy Efficiency. They have also created several career maps for folks out there that are looking for jobs in the solar, wind, and bioenergy areas. In addition, the Better Buildings program provides information about jobs and skills needed from an energy efficiency point of view, recognizing that there is huge opportunities in the building science sectors. So these are great options for people of all education backgrounds to really join the clean energy workforce, but help us in the endeavors as we move forward to drive clean energy. And recognizing that I really want to say that everybody can have a role to play in the conversations that we hope to have moving forward. Now, specifically within the Office of Electricity, we hope to continue to advance jobs in the transmission area, as well as advancing R&Ds that will provide ways for grid modernization. As was mentioned earlier, what grid modernization really entails is advancing the capacity and capability of the transmission and distribution system as we look at new technology advancements, as we look at ways to improve the visibility of the system, as we look at ways to improve the operations of the system, as well as deploying new technologies. And really that comes from allowing everyone to engage in the marketplace, but also engage in their ability to manage their own energy use. When we talk about consumers, we really want to talk about demand response and the opportunities from a building's energy management system, but also as continued electrification of buildings in the transportation sector. We also want to stimulate the ability to have distributed energy resources and provide a foundation and investment from transmission and distribution for better control and operations of the system at large from an efficiency perspective. So with respect to the American Jobs Plan, we really want to push things even further. This once in a lifetime or once in a generation investment, the goal is to create millions of good jobs and rebuild our country's infrastructure and really posture the United States as a global leader in the energy landscape. We hope to have targeted investments from tax credits and incentives that will help build out at least 20 gigawatts of high voltage capacity power lines and mobilize tens of billions in private sector capital in really investing in our infrastructure. There are other phases of the jobs plan that's also looking at tax incentives for clean energy generation and storage. And hopefully as those get developed, this will be paired with job creation and creating good quality jobs as we look as opportunities for a clean energy perspective. The other aspect that I guess I really would like to get into maybe is a little bit more on a personal note of why would we really want to drive and push energy? What is important in succeeding as we look at the energy landscape? And from my perspective, it is to help drive that transition. It is to help lead change. And as we look at the workforce and as we look at opportunities for engaging a variety of what I would say people that have a role to play, we really want to think about how can we change the dialogue and having, whether it is folks that are in high school, learn about the potential and opportunities for energy and in the energy space to continue to develop the science and technology, engineering and math programs as we think about STEM and STEM opportunities. But it is continuing to drive that opportunity. The other thing is really empowering the future. Can we really empower I think, our destiny and take control as we look at how we're investing in the United States, but investing in our own actions, whether it is energy efficiency, demand management, distributed energy resources, and thinking about, from at least my hope is to build a stronger grid that is an enabler, that allows for engagement of consumers, but also the importance integration of clean energy resources. So this conversation is about leading change and about leading people. And so I hope to really continue the dialogue in this space as we look at the clean energy transition. I guess I can't emphasize enough, at the end of the day, it is the work and it is the people. It is bringing affordable and reliable electricity to every American family and building community dialogue and conversations of how can we manage as well emergency actions and emergency capabilities to build a stronger future for the citizens and the Americans and Americans. So I know we're on the right path, and I really thank you all for having me here today. And I look forward to the further dialogue on the topic, but recognizing that this is a great opportunity as we invest in our future. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Pat. That was great. We love hearing from you. And now I'm going to introduce everyone to Courtney Galatioto. Courtney joined the Smart Electric Power Alliance, we're going to refer to it as SEPA, in 2019. She is Chief of Staff and Vice President of Strategic Partnerships. She works to align SEPA's mission and goals with high quality execution, fosters inclusive and productive relationships, and evaluates and manages risk. She serves as an advisor to the President and CEO and is the Principal Liaison for SEPA's Board of Directors and Strategic Partnerships. She came to SEPA with a decade of experience in the energy industry and previously served as the Vice President for Stakeholder Relations at the Alliance to Save Energy, where she oversaw business development and corporate relations. Courtney's here today to discuss SEPA's Utility Transformation Challenge. Courtney?
Great, thanks. I'm glad to be here. And I think I have some slides that someone's going to bring up. Perfect. So I'm going to get into a specific part of what Pat was just referring to. So the Smart Electric Power Alliance, SEPA, we're a nonprofit that facilitates the electric power industry's smart transition to a clean and modern energy future. So we work in education, research, standards, collaboration. We have about 1,100 organizational members. 700 or more of those are actually utilities. So our real sweet spot is working with the electric power sector to try to help them achieve a carbon-free energy future and accelerate that happening. So next slide. So one of the things that we set out to do was we recognize there's a ton of momentum right now with utilities in the energy industry setting carbon-free commitments. And what we wanted to understand was, one, what do these various utilities have in common in terms of, are there markers of success that can be learned from peer-to-peer utility? The other thing we wanted to learn was, where are we actually at with this? The commitments are important, but we want to know what action is needed next, where resources are needed next, which research is missing. And so what this is a survey of 130 utilities. It represents 63% of customer accounts in the United States. And it addresses multiple dimensions. So we get beyond just the technological aspect. We get into the culture, we get into the business models. Those are the other things that we're sort of surveying when we undertook this. So it's meant to be comprehensive, not completely comprehensive because, it is a survey and, it's not every utility that took it, but it is a nice mixture of utilities. Next slide, Pete, please. That did take this survey and participate and give us some good data on sort of where they're at in their carbon reduction goal. So we looked at 4 different areas: clean energy resources, modern grid enablement, aligned actions and engagement, and corporate leadership. And as you will see, We also have a pretty solid regional breakdown, and we have different utility types, so public power, investor owned. And those are different because it's important that we recognize that everyone has different sort of policy frameworks that they're working in. They have different regional things that they have to combat, whether it be, do they have access to wind? Are they more going to be focused on solar? So taking into account all of those different variables that might affect how a utility can sort of be effective in their transition. When we talk about clean energy resources, we're talking about deployment and procurement of clean energy technologies, demand flexibility, EE. When we talk about corporate leadership, we're talking about change management. So that's a huge one. Utilities are big machines. They're big organizations. They have very complex business and operational models. And so it's, how do you take something like that and pivot quickly? Aligned actions and engagements. So that's business models, customer programs, understanding that, these things are being influenced by external forces, including things like the Biden administration's goal. And then last, modern grid enablement. So we're really talking about integrated distribution, grid management, and really talking about how do we facilitate the transformation to clean energy, not just how do we allow it. So next slide. Thank you. Oh, one more back. Yeah, there we go, insights. So what do we learn? So hundreds of questions, lots of data, trends, all that good stuff. We learned about 4 different trends areas, which is, what do these all have in common? What do our leaders have in common in terms of the folks that are making significant progress right now? And the 4 areas that we see continuous, I would say, alignment in how they're addressing things are in cultural and leadership transformation. So we're talking about transparency, accountability. We're talking about leaders who are motivated as well as incentivized, for instance, to want to make this change and this transformation. And the accountability part of it here is going into, it's okay. Some of us don't know how utilities or the energy industry is going to achieve some of these carbon-free goals. And that's part of one of the insights, which is being able to say that and say that to your stakeholders. Meaningful commitments. So, in the United States right now, I think about 74 utilities have made either a emission reduction or a carbon reduction goal. So that's 74 out of a lot of utilities. It represents 71% of customers, but that is sort of, that number is growing, but it's also showing that we're still leaving out some folks who haven't made that yet. And that's an important first step in truly meeting those goals. And then a comprehensive approach, moving beyond clean energy resources, as I've said. So, looking at the utility business, looking at the operational side of things, looking at your workforce. Do you have the right people on the team? What skills, what leadership skills are you missing? What workforce skills are you missing? That kind of thing. So, and then continuous collaboration, which is why things like this are so important. It takes all different types of organizations and stakeholders to sort of dissect and take apart the energy industry and try to make change like this happen. So the next slide. So what you see here is, even though we're saying 63% of the survey, covered 63% of customer accounts, and 74 utilities in the U.S. have, oh, I'm getting a chat. Thanks for sending that. 74 utilities have these carbon reduction goals. What you actually see here is 50% and below are essentially able to get their percentage of clean energy from their retail supply. And so what we want to do is we want to see the right side increase. 3 or 4 is only representing those who took the survey, but a lot of that is also hydropower. And so what we're seeing is this sort of this influx between where people are setting these goals, utilities are setting these goals, regulatory bodies are setting them, federal government is setting them, but percentage-wise, there's a gap. So next slide. So in the survey, we didn't score them, meaning like these folks didn't get the most points. But what we did do is we said, okay, looking at all these different factors and areas, who is making progress and highlighting, what's needed and next, meaning they're showing us that these are effective and successful tools and tactics, and they're currently leading the way. 90% of these have a 100% carbon reduction target. So I would say, as we noted, that is like one of the first things that you can see from utilities that are successful in accelerating that movement towards carbon free. And then 40% of them have a carbon reduction goal to be met by 2035. And as part of that, it's an aggressive goal. But what it does tell us is that, they want to make it happen. They're committed to making it happen. They may not necessarily know how to make it happen. I think that there's sort of an understanding that about, 80% of our technological solutions to achieve carbon-free exist, or we know how to use them at sort of a utility commercial scale. But there's still 20% that it's not scaled yet. Maybe it doesn't even exist yet. It might not even exist. So we're really pleased to announce that these, for this year, we're on the leaderboard, and I think it's a good sign that they're not all in one geographic location. They're not all the same type of utility. I think that it is promising for the utility industry that these different types of utilities are making it work, that there are ways to incorporate it into their business. Next slide. Right. So recommendations. So what we wanted to do too was, SEPA wanted to say, we know there's some common threads, there's some common points here, but now what? So what do we do with that information? And as we're trying to get the utility and the electric power industry to be carbon free by 2050, that's SEPA's goal. I know that the Biden administration's goal is pollution free energy by 2035. What we're looking here is we're saying that these 5 things are the things that are going to put an organization most quickly on the path to achieve that right now. So again, strengthen the carbon reduction commitments with science-based goals, address transformation comprehensively across the organization. So not just relying on the technology itself, but relying on the business model, the customer programs, the stakeholder engagement side of things in terms of understanding what a community needs with resiliency and what they might have in terms of climate change threats and risks. Embrace clean energy as a core element of utility mission and culture. So we all know the energy industry has changed dramatically. Players that didn't used to be considered energy players are now. And so the more that we sort of say, it's a lot of people, but let's help the boat rise fully together, the better off that we'll be able to work with technology and solution providers and softwares and startups and all those good things to sort of embrace it as a core element. Stakeholder engagement cannot be highlighted enough as part of the success of these utilities. They are able to bring together expertise and considerations and programs and innovation and all those things to achieve something that we haven't achieved before. And so that's what it takes. And then integrate equity. And I know this is a huge consideration for many in the industry, but EV accessibility, building electrification, community solar, microgrid and resiliency projects, these are things that are necessary to achieve a carbon-free energy future, because we can't keep doing things the same way we have before. So really being okay with being creative and prioritizing all those different voices and needs. And that, next slide. So there is a link there if you want to check out. There's a ton of data and information on that, but I just wanted to give y'all a little bit of a snapshot.
Thanks so much, Courtney. All right. So with all that being said about what all the changes to the utilities, this brings us to Victoria Way. She's the Director of Customer Success. at EnergiaWorks and has 7 years experience in recruitment, with the past 6 years focused on renewable energy in the United States, Canada, and Australia. Throughout her career, she has identified her own passion for helping better the future of women in renewables through volunteer work with Women in Renewable and Sustainable Energy, also known as WRISE, and Women in Renewable Energy. During her time volunteering with Iron and Earth, she successfully helped grow the Calgary presence to help oil and gas professionals move into the renewable energy field. So Victoria, what can you tell us today about changes that you're seeing in the job market for clean energy?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, thank you everybody for joining us today. I am actually based out of Calgary, Alberta, but currently in Vancouver. So if you hear a lot of birds chirping in the background, I'm just enjoying some of the sunshine since it has been winter for the last, I feel like, 12 years in Calgary. So anyway, getting to the topic here. I think with the renewable industry, you know, I started out when there were very few and far jobs, especially in the Canadian market. It was very quiet. And then when I joined EnergiaWorks 5 years ago, it was just as we had the NDP government in Alberta announce the renewable energy program, which was a 5,500 megawatt auction for renewable energy. We did not hit that target. Unfortunately, we changed governments about, I would say, 3/4 of the way to that target. But the industry really changed and grew, especially for the Alberta market at that time. And, you know, jobs became more abundant. And so there's a lot more people in that market that are now more qualified, have more experience, and have grown their careers. On the US side, I would say it was fairly consistent growth during the Trump administration, but it's really been since Biden took office that we've seen the most growth. We've had the most year-over-year growth in the last, I would say, 6 months, where, you know, last year we might have only placed 30 candidates, and this year we've already exceeded that number. I think the biggest areas that we're seeing the growth in is the project development, the asset management, and the engineering fields. So for project development, we're seeing a lot more growth in kind of those smaller utility scale projects, anything from, you know, that 1 megawatt to 20 megawatts. Engineering is really just straight across the board, whether it's on residential, commercial, or utility scale projects. And that goes for mostly in the solar side. The wind side is still a little bit quieter, but it is still growing. And then we've seen an especially big movement in the asset management side, a lot to do with the technical overview of projects after they've been completed. So performance analysts, operations and maintenance specialists, and people that really understand software. So being able to monitor those projects once they've gone into the commissioning stage and then into you know, the commercialization has become very, very key for a lot of the companies that we're working with. I would say over the last 6 months alone, we've probably taken in 20 to 25 new development positions. We've probably kept up a little bit more on the engineering side. I would say we've had probably 40 plus positions. And then on the asset manager side, we've also brought in another probably 10 positions. And then we've kind of had to ask our clients to kind of take a break on us, just because we've had a little bit of a demand issue where, you know, we want to make sure that everybody that we're bringing in, we're working to complete projects on time for them. I would say the installer side is also becoming quite busy. We've seen a little bit of an uptick on those types of positions for people who are looking to kind of get their foot in the door and work their way up from installation into project management or construction management. In terms of the jobs, you know, there's an expected 900,000 jobs that will be needed between now and 2035, just to cover what the targets are in the US. We're finding that there is a huge talent shortage. So there's realistically, I would say probably one candidate for every job posting out there. So it's a really great time for people who are looking to transition into the renewable industry, but you do have to know how to sell yourself, and you need to be able to keep your expectations within reason. We find a lot of people coming from the oil and gas industry are very misguided on the compensation that they're looking for. The margins in renewable projects are not as high. That means the salary is not as high. So where you might have made $150,000 as a project manager, you're probably looking at closer to 100, maybe 110. In the development side, it also requires that you understand that this position will take multiple different positions that you might have in oil and gas and combine them together. So as a developer, you might be responsible for the land, the permitting, the interconnection agreements, the PPAs, all the way through to that notice to proceed. And then you might hand it off to a project manager who is responsible for the construction aspects. And I think the other thing with the asset management, that's a little bit easier to transition. Anybody that's worked with SCADA in oil and gas can work with SCADA in the renewable industry. It's just understanding the different data sets and how to program the different inverters. So there's a lot of different ways that you can get into the industry that way. I think as well, one key thing that people should keep in mind, I know there's a lot of people that are coming from an international background. It is a lot more difficult to find opportunities in the US and Canada if you are not currently in those countries, especially with COVID. It's really changed the dynamic in terms of companies being able to give you an offer and you easily being able to relocate into a new country. Specifically in the US market, the H1B visa process or lottery is closed now, and it won't reopen until the spring of 2021. So there are a lot of companies who are not willing to take anybody on an EAD or any other visa that will require future sponsorship for an H1B visa before that lottery opens again. In the Canadian market, I would say it's much easier to get a visa coming over on an engineering background. But realistically, if you are looking at relocating into the US or Canadian markets, you do need to be a STEM applicant in order to be the most successful. It's quite different in terms of finding people who are willing to sponsor you if you don't have some sort of engineering mathematics type background. I see a few questions coming in. So the first one there that I do see are, we don't typically recruit on unionized jobs. That is typically something the union does themselves and helps people with. Union rules and regulations can be very difficult to navigate, so we kind of steer clear of those. Most of our clients are looking for permanent employees that are full-time, and it's pretty rare most of them are part of a union. I think the other question here is for virtual work opportunities. We're seeing a very large shift in those types of opportunities because of COVID. We are recommending to our clients who are very steadfast that they want somebody in an office environment to really focus on shifting to that remote work. There's been a ton of companies out there who have shifted to it, who are not expecting their employees to come back full time after COVID, who are willing to work out a two-day in the office, 3-day remote type opportunity, or have just decided to go fully remote. A, because it costs them less money in terms of office leases. B, it's increased a lot of productivity for a lot of their employees. And it's increased the culture for people who like to work remotely, but they do keep that option open for those who prefer to be in an office. The majority of the candidates that we're working with these days are not interested in positions that require relocation. So our clients have had to be nimble enough to adapt to that and offer the opportunity for remote work.
I see another question came in from Maria. She's asking, in what sectors, positions, departments is there hiring for entry-level recent graduate applicants?
Good question. We don't really work a lot with recent grads, just because, you know, we are a success-based company where we get a fee for the people that we do place, and typically for companies that are looking for new entrants to the market, they're not going to pay us the fee for that. So it's not something that we typically work on. I would say really across the board, everything is available for new entrants. But if you're struggling to find work, it's really more about the networking aspect than applying online. So you really have to be proactive in your search, meaning you need to reach out to people on LinkedIn that are in the position that you are trying to attain. Invite them for a virtual coffee. If your state or your province allows for in-person meeting, invite them out for a real coffee. Everybody is probably sick of sitting at home these days. So if you're allowed, obviously within reason, stay safe. But it's about talking to them about how they got into the position that they're currently in, and not just being forthcoming and saying, I'm looking for work, give me advice, or I'm looking for work, do you have any opportunities? Those types of networking opportunities really need to happen organically, and it can't be something where you are going in and being aggressive that you're on the job market, because people are going to recommend you to their HR, and they're going to recommend you to people they know are hiring. If you approach the opportunity in a way that is non-threatening and it's not, you know, putting a lot of pressure on them to help you. You know, I get a lot of calls from parents in the industry who are like, my kid is looking for work, what do you have? And I'm like, well, unfortunately, nothing. But the ones that call me and say, hey, I'm just trying to find out more information for my kid, what can I do to help them find work? I'm more often open to giving them information on some of our clients that could potentially be looking for internships. So it's definitely a lot to do with the type of approach that you take with each of the people that you network with. I think I missed a couple more here as well, and I unfortunately.
No, that's fine. I was going to go through it and open up questions to everyone. Courtney and Victoria, in terms of workforce issues in the utility sector, there's a lot of people who are retiring. Any thoughts on ways for utilities to create opportunities for those who are seeking to work in the industry?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, one of the beauties of it is that the energy industry, as I said before, is expanding to include a lot of different types of organizations. So I would say there are a lot of programs. Edison Electric Institute, for instance, is putting some effort into ensuring that the utility industry not only retains really good talent, because I think in the past there was maybe some thought that, you know, clean energy, someone might leave a utility to go work at a very cool sort of clean energy startup, you know, but the reality is utilities actually often have their own startups. You know, and so that's part of it, and sort of, you know, creating that awareness that those types of opportunities are there. In my experience, though, one of the biggest things I've seen is utilities really need to keep their executive leadership pipeline fresh. They need to make sure it's diverse. They need to make sure those folks come in with a true technical and policy understanding of, like, if we're bringing clean energy online fully, you know, how is that going to happen, so that they're prepared to create and implement strategies to make that happen, including implement strategies of the workforce that's going to do it, vocational jobs, folks who are going to maintain, deploy. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I would add to that as well, for utilities who are looking to bring in fresher talent. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about utilities, but there's also some cultural differences between working in a utility and working in, a startup, or working in, a typical developer, where there's a lot more red tape and hoops to jump through in order to get into the utility, and then B, once you're there, being able to perform your job without having to go through so many checks and balances to get anything done. Most people are looking, or I should say younger generations are looking for companies that really value their opinions and make them feel heard within an organization. And I think sometimes utilities, because they've done business the same way for so long, can tend to, lose those voices in the shuffle, which makes those people feel a little bit less valued as an employee. And then they start looking at other opportunities. So in order to replenish the retiring workforce, there has to be some sort of cultural change to balance that out for the younger generations.
For sure.
And I guess I would just add to that, in the complexity of the environment that we're facing today with respect to the challenges, the projects, and the skill sets that we're looking for. In some ways, you have to have an appreciation of when you talk about asset management and just the analysis of data. The utilities themselves are evolving, where the data sciences is becoming stronger from that point of view, as well as the complexity around the culture and the social sciences, as we look at different rate structures, as we look at different components and contributions to the system. That I think we have to keep that in mind with the workforce and the skill sets moving forward.
Agreed.
Definitely. For sure. Well, all of you are very accomplished women in your careers. Do you have any advice to share with the attendees today about career development, or when facing a crossroad in your career, what you would recommend they do?
I'm happy to offer the first one, which is imposter syndrome. Women, but this is, I think, part of the human experience, but women especially, or people of color, sometimes feel like they don't belong in a sector, or that other people are more experienced. And all I can say is, as part of breaking down those barriers, moving past the imposter syndrome, to know that you have the skills you don't have, that you can learn, you can find mentors, to sort of have confidence that no one is ever hired at 100% capability. They're always going to learn something. There's always some kind of learning curve. And so for me, that's advice that I've given, but I've also gotten many times, is to just move past that mental block, apply for the job. Don't stop yourself from applying to it. Don't stop yourself from doing the interview, even if you're not quite sure you're the right candidate.
I love that.
I think the thing that for myself that has been, and obviously I've also suffered from imposter syndrome. I think it's impossible for you to go through your career without at some point. But I think the thing that I would say to anybody who's really looking to grow their career is, don't be afraid to step up and take on more responsibility and learn new skill sets. I think there's many people who, get frustrated because they're not moving farther in their career. And they're the type of person that comes in and sits down and gets their work done. And they say, well, I'm getting my work done. Why am I not moving up through the chain of command? I've never been afraid to, say, hey, I can see you're struggling to keep up with something. Why don't you show me how to do it so that I can help you with it? And then, in the future, you've got somebody that you can rely on who can help you when you're overextended. And I think you learn so many different skill sets, and people start to value the fact that you're reliable and you can help them with everything that's going on and juggle many balls, so to speak. So I think that's probably my biggest piece of advice. Don't be afraid to step up and just take on new challenges.
So I agree with both of those pieces of advice, because I too experienced from the imposter syndrome as well in my career, starting out as a ceramic scientist and then ending up in the utility space. Really had to be not afraid to learn new things and to take on new challenges to learn and grow. And then I guess the last piece of advice is, hone your speaking skills. I would say that a lot of what holds, I would say, women, but people back, people of color, is the confidence level to really engage in a conversation and to speak up and really demonstrate the knowledge that you have and your willingness to learn and grow in a space. And so I guess in combining all three pieces that we recommend, that's really, I think, the key to success moving forward.
I love that advice, and I agree. And I think joining organizations helps too. With public speaking, joining Seawheel, for instance, for anyone who's looking for organizations to join, this is a really great one. You'll have a lot of opportunities to volunteer on committees if you're not doing that in your day job, just to get more involved, for sure. So for the three of you, for those looking to transition into clean energy, do you have any tips for them to develop their resume, like such as organizations they should join or things they should read up on?
So I could give some advice on that as well. I think there's tons of different organizations out there. There's ethnic-based organizations, there's industry-based organizations, there is career-specific organizations, there are gender organizations. I think if you're coming from a different industry, the most important thing is to do some sort of educational support, whether it is day courses, whether it is going on to, I think it's Corsica has a ton of free courses that you can take specific to the renewable industry. Various different industries, but they have solar courses, they have wind courses, they have resource assessment courses. It just really depends on what your niche market is. If you have the time and the energy to do it, I always recommend doing either a master's or an MBA specific to renewable energy or sustainable energy. But mostly it comes down to networking. Like, just make sure you're reaching out to and talking to as many people as possible in the industry and learning more about it, so that when you go into an interview, you are educated. Employers can always tell when you're somebody who's like, oh, I can't find work in, as an example, oil and gas. So I'm just going to throw my hat into the ring for renewable energy. If they're asking you questions and you don't understand even the basic jargon, you're not going to get very far. So just understanding the industry as a whole and really putting some effort into, your research on the market is going to put you a step ahead in those types of interviews.
And I would only add, so in looking at, things to highlight on your resume, organizations to join, I know that in the chat, folks are sharing some really great examples of organizations that can kind of help give you that sort of leg up and sort of gaining your knowledge. I also think project management being highlighted as a skill set on your resume cannot be understated. At the end of the day, a lot of what is happening as part of the clean energy transition is enormous, complex projects and projects made of projects. And so being able to show that you can work as part of a team to bring something to completion is extremely important and very valuable for research institutes that are hiring, for the government, for nonprofits, for trade associations, advocacy groups. That's one of the top skills that I see them saying, like, we need more project managers across, whether it's their events, their programming, their research teams.
So I agree with that. Project managers are an extremely important skill sets moving forward. And that I agree also about taking certifications and training. But I would also say just read the articles out there where the trend lines are heading in the industry. And that in some ways can give you a pulse of some of the things that you want to think about to have on your resume moving forward. So you look at demand response programs and some of the activities where FERC is heading with FERC Order 2222, excuse me. And it really goes after just understanding the trend lines and networking so that you truly understand where the industry is heading. And I think that actually provides some additional opportunities.
Thank you so much. Do any of you have anything you want to elaborate further on from your presentations today? We have a few minutes left. If anyone has any questions, now's the time. Post them in the chat box. Getting recommendations for that Energy Gang podcast. Thank you, Courtney.
Yeah, I find that if you pick something that's homework every week, that's dedicated to just you and yourself, the momentum of your life and job can help you make sure that you know what you're still interested in terms of, you know, even the energy sector or what type of work within the sector. But I do say, like, once a week, make sure you do something that's for your own professional development to make sure that you're maintaining engaged and following those trend lines.
I was gonna say maybe everybody could share their favorite publication that they like to read. For me, it's definitely Solar Wake Up. So if you are not subscribed to that, I recommend it. Nico does a great job, and he's got an awesome podcast as well. Maybe the rest of the ladies have something that they can share that would be a great resource for everyone else.
I think to be honest, I've been looking at and trying to stimulate some of the DOE resources. So I guess I'm going to be a little DOE with the DOE podcast and some of the things that DOE has done with the materials that we have out there from an energy landscape point of view. But I guess in a closing thought is every person is different. And my closing thought to everybody in getting into this space is understand your strengths and your weaknesses and find ways to really complement your skill sets as you continue to think about your career. What do you really like to do? Are you more interested in the analytics side of things versus a hands-on type job and a hands-on type activity? And truly understand what motivates you to get up every day, because that's what's really going to drive the passion moving forward. And I guess I would also say recognize the type of person you are, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, you know, and that also drives what skill sets you need to develop in the teaming relationships and the mentoring relationships. So I guess from my closing point of view, that those are some of the things that we also have to keep in mind. A lot of people talk about the technical side of things, but I think we also have to recognize who we are as a person and how to build our capacity and capability in looking at our strengths and weaknesses.
Pat, thank you so much for saying that. As someone who doesn't come from the fully subject matter technical side of things, you know, I think it took me a while in my career to figure out that all of those things are true, and it does require those different skill sets from introvert to extrovert. So, you know, definitely following your gut and knowing what makes you happy and who you are so that you feel confident when you go to work and you're sort of doing these tasks each day. I think the other thing that I just can't say enough as part of this is if you're not happy doing what you're doing, volunteer with different organizations, whether it be maybe an energy efficiency group that's doing local energy efficiency projects, or like Grid Alternatives doing local solar projects. You can very quickly learn, do you like the technical side of things? Do you like the people side of things? Do you like the event management side of things? And so just really giving yourself permission to sort of explore those different things through the energy industry. And, you know, the good news is the clean energy industry and the energy industry, they're going to be the same thing. They are going to be the same thing. And it's going to require a tremendous workforce to support that level of complexity and innovation.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate everything Courtney, Patricia, and Victoria said today. You gave everyone a lot of really great advice, a lot to think about. Michelle, if you can go to the next slide real quick. Next slide, please. After that, there you go. Okay, we're going to wrap up today's session. I just want to urge everyone, our fourth part of this career advancement series is taking place on June 16th. We will have Natalie Osborne, Beth Offenbacher, and Janine Fennell moderating the session. So thank you so much to our three speakers today, Victoria, Courtney, and Patricia. Your advice was wonderful. We loved having you here, and thank you to all of our attendees today. Take care, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.